Hi, I'm Marshall Stern, and I've spent over 35 years leading and growing multiple small businesses. I know firsthand the struggles of entrepreneurship, feeling isolated, lonely, overwhelmed, and feeling like you have to do it all by yourself. I've been through multiple recessions, and I have felt the highs and the lows. I've been there, and I get it. This podcast is here to change that. Every week, I will bring you straight talking advice, real world strategies, and honest conversations about what it takes to succeed in business without the fluff, the gimmicks, or the sugarcoating. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start making real progress, then you are in the right place. This is the Stern Truth. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Stern Truth Business Unfiltered. And I would like to introduce you to my amazing guest, Julia. Julia, how are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing great, and I'm very excited to be part of this podcast.
I have been looking forward to having you here and to share your wisdom, but also your journey
And
in
I'd love
leadership.
to do that. There is a lot that I can offer in terms of maybe some wisdom or advice on balancing work and pleasure in life. And I think that this episode will really showcase that.
Oh, I love it. Getting right to the point. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you. So let's just first, for context, what do you do? Who's Julia?
I combine psychology with spirituality, and I help people become self aware. In that journey, normally they discover self acceptance, unconditional love, and really just become self aware of who they are and what their wants and passions are. Because if we think about it, most people live on autopilot rather understanding and seeing their journey ahead. So if somebody has a clear vision and a goal, it makes life easier. And this is where I come in to help identify that goal.
Okay, so most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders. What do you think? How does this benefit them? Like, why? Because, okay, before we go there, this is the stern truth. When you mention the word spirituality, a lot of business owners, leaders might think woo woo. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, so
kumbaya.
here's the thing. I use word spirituality and I avoid using words such as energies or religions, or, some people refer to spirituality as Reiki. So to everybody, spirituality is their own thing,
Mhm.
right? Somebody call ayahuasca spirituality. So journeys are different and to each its own. So when I call it psychology/spirituality, all I'm doing is I'm bringing awareness that I personally believe that there's three parts to every human. Whether you are a business owner or entrepreneur, or you're just starting, or you're an employee, or even a stay-at-home parent, which is still a job, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. In the beginning, you are a human. You're a human being, and I believe that every human being consists of body, which is physical, our mind, which is technically our logic and what I call ego, and our soul, which is our heart and our passions and really our feelings, our heart. Some people call it intuition. So there's really different names for it. But if we combine it all that shows us is there is more to us than just a shell. And if we
Mhm.
acknowledge that there is more to us than just a shell, that's when the journey begins of self awareness and self discovery.
Interesting. Okay, so
You see, I
for
sorry to interrupt, Marshall. It just I wanted to add that I believe that we all are born with ability of unconditional love. And what is unconditional love? Unconditional love starts with lack of judgment and acceptance. So if we look at 1 or 2 year old, they're not prejudiced, they're not racist, they're not sexist. They just all loving beings that love even the parents that would abuse them. However, as the child grows, we see people making comments like, you walk weird, you laugh weird, you write
oh,
wrong, you speak wrong, your jokes are not funny. And then the child starts learning to play different roles. So, different roles or masks, that's what I refer to as ego, right? Something to please the people around them, please the society. So, my goal is when I meet somebody, in age, and I would say 20 plus. That's when the mask or the ego is sitting strong. By that time, the person developed a personality, a role that they tend to play. So that's when I come in and I try to discover who is underneath it all, who is underneath that role that we're trying to portray to society. Does that make sense?
No, 100%. So I'm thinking from the viewpoint of our listeners. Okay.
Mhm.
Again, business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs, founders, all that kind of stuff. We talked about this a little bit before we got on. We talked about burnout, and burnout's a huge thing with with a lot of people, but especially on the business side of business owners because they're doing so much. So one thing I do with my clients, I really help them focus on activities that actually energize them and that they're good at, and that actually drives business and revenue rather than the activities that drain them. But we also have to take time for ourselves because we
Well,
will get burnt
100%.
out.
I believe that the moment you reach the burnout, your business will struggle.
Oh
That's
yeah.
when you will go into financial crisis. Because really, if we, and for those who believe in energies, right, would agree that money is also a sort of energy. So
Hmm.
for us, we exchange our energy for that money. And if we're burnt out, then that exchange will not be happening. And that's why businesses crash, because there is not enough energy or desire or passion, whatever you want to call it, for an entrepreneur to keep going. Because one thing we got to remember, if we concentrate on one aspect of our life, which is business, which is great, people tend to forget the personal aspect of their life.
Hmm.
But there is a lot that can charge our mental and physical and emotional battery so we can go and perform in our business better. So the problem is a lot of people don't know how to balance it or how to come up with that balance. And I think that's when coaching plays a big role in helping that.
Okay, just want to shift gears for a moment. Um, have you ever been or been close to burnout?
Actually, I was. That's how it all changed for me.
Okay.
It was year 2014.
Hmm.
At that point, I had two businesses in Montreal. One of them was a factory that I was running. And then I had a business with my husband that was in Toronto and partially located in Texas. So we had a couple branches. And I remember we went out for dinner. We went to a restaurant. I had my meal and then I went to the washroom to wash my hands. And next thing I know, I had paramedics over top of me screaming, Julia, Julia. And my husband just panicked. And basically, I just stood up, went and collapsed. And I remember having headaches prior to this incident, and I would wave it off and I would be like, I'm fine, pop another Advil, let's keep going, another coffee, let's keep going. And this is when I realized that what I was doing was completely unhealthy. As much as I was performing well at my job, side of it, I was really existing and surviving rather than living my life, which means that I was pouring everything into my business,
Hmm.
but that's not enough for me to get back to recharge. And that's what truly burnt me out.
Wow. Okay.
Well, it was a good change because this is when I
Yeah.
got into spirituality. I remember
Yeah.
telling my husband that when it comes to being an entrepreneur, I'm very passionate, goal oriented, and I see my future. But outside of my businesses, I saw nothing. I didn't feel that I was really an involved mom because I had somebody else helping me raise my children. I didn't feel like I was really involved wife because I was constantly busy and on the go. There's trips to Montreal, flights, trains, you name it, rather than home dinners and meaningful conversations. And I
Hmm.
realized that even seeing friends became such a special occasion. We do it something on birthdays or Christmases, where really it should take part of everyday life. And I think that in that process of proving the world that I can make money and I can do it, I forgot that, first of all, I was a human being with desires and wants, and that there's something that my soul might have wanted. So to me, this was kind of a chance to regroup myself. And I always say that I not necessarily believe in religion, but I have faith. And I
Right.
remember when I was in the hospital thinking to myself and kind of speaking to God and saying, okay, God, I really want to live more. And I remember this voice in my head saying, if you want to live more, what are you living for? Just to work another day? And this is what really made me see the situation in a different perspective.
Hmm. I love that. Tell me, okay, so 2014, you're beyond burnout because you collapse.
Mhm.
You start to change the way you think, the way you, obviously the way you act and what you do and pouring into yourself. and I want our listeners to hear, I want them to hear a little bit of the journey. Because what led to burnout, we all know you pushing, 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 you're working, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not exercising, you're not eating right, not sleeping, thus you're not sleeping right, all that kind of stuff. You're short with your significant other, you're short with your kids. We all know that kind of stuff. What do you think? Okay, give us some golden nuggets, okay? Some tips for business owners who are feeling they might not even realize it. They might be listening to this episode or watching this episode and they might not realize it, okay? But I know from experience, their significant other, people in their lives may notice it. They may be saying things to them like, slow down, you're working so hard, okay? What are the signs, I guess? That's the question. What are the signs that people should look at? And what can they do with those signs?
Well, the first one, I would say a sign of denial. Because if somebody gives you feedback and you refuse it right away, that does show that you're in denial because you're not even allowing a small possibility that it might be true. Personally, one thing I've changed in my behavior is nowadays when somebody gives me feedback, even if my initial knee jerk reaction is it's not true, I allow myself to still be open minded enough to accept the possibility that what if it is true? And then I go down that road, developing this thought and saying, okay, what if it is true? How would I see it? And normally, believe me, you start seeing the situation from a different perspective. And I think this is the true strength of humans that we're capable of is seeing different perspectives because life is not black and white. There's always two sides of the coin, and it's important to vision that as much as one can think that he or she providing for the family and this is the best for them without communicating with your family what really do they need, you can never
Mm-hmm.
know the true priorities. Yes, if you're a solo bird and you live on your own and you have no kids and no spouse, sure, live your life the way you see fit. But if you chose to have a family or raise the family, you should take those people into consideration. And I find that with my journey, the way it kind of started after my collapse, is the first thing I did is I reached out to people to offer help. And I remember my husband asking me because I was on LinkedIn, and back in the days, my LinkedIn profile said passionate entrepreneur. And all of a sudden, I throw this post saying that if anybody needs a breath of fresh air or positive thinking or just positive thoughts, you know, please come to me, send me a message, and I will be here to kind of lift up your spirits. From that point on, within a couple of months and seeing people reaching out just to hear something nice, because perhaps they don't have anybody who's positive in their lifetime, I recognize that there is a lot of help I can give
Mm-hmm.
without it costing me money or without even a big effort. So back in 2015, I've made a decision that from now on, every single day, I will pick three random strangers and do three acts of kindness. And that was kind of my base. And to tell you the truth, Marshall, when you do things for others, especially people that you don't know, strangers that they cannot return that favor or that help, you really feel fulfilled and empowered. Now, with that being said, once you feel fulfilled and empowered, you feel more secure. Once you feel more secure, you feel more confident. Once you're confident, you can perform better, whether again you work at home, whether you work for somebody else, or whether you work for yourself. So again, I think everything starts with self, and this is what people forget. People forget about themselves and the whole process of making money and running after big goals that society usually projects on us, because some people, they try to achieve something that they don't even want. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that for myself, my desires back in, let's say, 2012 and 2022 were completely opposite. I went from wanting things to wanting connections. I went from valuing and putting money ahead of it all to valuing relationships and people and seeing more value in deepness and depth rather than surface.
So that
Does
brings
that
up
make sense?
no, 100%, and that brings up really a bigger question and a bigger. I would even call it I don't know if it's a pandemic or epidemic, if that's the right word. So many entrepreneurs, so many small business owners are pushing so hard because we live in, I always call it, we live in this, I used to call it Amazon.now world, like our kids, right? Everyone's like, everything's now. Now it's like ChatGPT and AI, everything's now. All the answers are in front of you. So they think people get into business, and I see this all the time, they think they got to keep pushing and pushing because they want the answers now. They want the clients now. They want the money now. So they keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, and then gets to the point where they collapse, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever being, burnout sets in because
Well,
they
here's
walk.
the thing,
Yeah.
Marshall, in that process of pushing, I always try to bring person's awareness to what are you pushing for? Is it
Mm,
retirement? Is it a specific goal? Is it to buy a house so you feel secure with your family? Because here's the thing, somebody might be pushing for that Maserati so they look better in front of their employees. And somebody might be pushing to buy a home where his or her children might feel secure. So pushing can be from two different directions. And there is a really great quote Jim Carrey said once. He said, I wish for people to get everything they want so they realize that it's not what they wanted.
mm,
And he
mhm.
gave example from his life that he remembers like working hard, to get this big mansion. And once he had it, yes, it was fun first year, two, but then it wore off. And he realized that that was just, a picture that he wanted that he thought would bring him happiness, but it had nothing to do with happiness because our happiness comes from internal feelings, from feeling of peace rather than feeling of the race. Because here's the thing, when we achieve our goals and we have that celebratory feeling of a win, that's great. But again, that is not peace, that's excitement.
Yeah.
And being in constant state of excitement is just simply not even healthy.
Yeah.
So really, peace is what people should be going after. And if somebody is in a rat race, come on, Marshall, you got to agree, there is no peace in that.
No, and that's why a lot of people leave corporate because they get burnt out. They leave the rat race and think, I'm going to start my own gig. Okay. And this happens all the time. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to work. I get freedom. Julia, I'm starting my own business. I am going to have freedom. I'm going to have financial freedom. I'm going to have time freedom. And you know what ends up happening? Zero
Tell me.
vacation time. Salary goes, they have zero salary or it goes down. Okay. So, and I'm not saying this to depress our listeners, right? But it's more to impress upon them that phrase you just said a few minutes ago. Okay. What? To ask yourself this question. I want every single person listening and watching, ask yourself this question. If you're anywhere, forget about burnout. Even if you think everything's fine because you said denial. Okay. Which is part of like, there's awareness, right? Opposite of denial, awareness, acceptance. What are you pushing for? That's my question. Julia's question. That's our question for all of you today. What are you pushing for? That, Julia, we're going to continue talking, but that could be it. That could be a wrap because that is such a powerful question that most people, if not everybody, doesn't even ask themselves.
Well, one thing that ties in with awareness, right, and living in awareness is to have purpose. So, one thing my kids and my husband and my friends know that I don't do anything without a purpose. Even if it's a simple conversation,
Mhm.
it's important for me to understand the intent behind this conversation and the purpose that I'm doing it for. So, going back again to pre burnout state, some people go after big mansions and houses and things that they can't even financially support. And yes, they do it to impress others. So there is no peace and satisfaction within because it's a pretty picture, but
Right.
underneath it all, it's all rotten. So really, you're better off building a healthy foundation underneath, understanding all the purposes. Because one thing I told my husband, I said, if my friends will turn away from me because I'm not rich enough, those are not my people, those are not my friends. I don't need to
Yeah.
impress my friends with my wallet. I need to impress myself, my friends, with who I am within. And that comes to entrepreneurs too and business owners. When you're working with somebody works with their clients or their employees or their suppliers, what type of person they are. because sometimes people play different roles with different people. I've seen, a manager talking nicely to a customer and then turning around and talking
Mm,
rudely to his employee. That means that he is switching roles within, I don't know, a 10-minute span. That shows me that the person is not authentic to themselves, because somebody who's aware, who moves with purpose, will be really consistent in their behavior, no matter who they're dealing with.
right.
Because if you're a kind person, you're going to be kind all around. Now, if you're faking kindness, then you will change that mask depending on who you're talking to. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense to me. I'm curious. So I want to know from the listeners if that makes sense to them, and if they have any questions on everything so far. She's going to add more. Everything so far that she's
Well, I'm sure that
share.
some people might be able to relate to that point.
Oh,
Somebody might recognize themselves saying,
yeah.
"Oh yeah, the way I talk to my wife, the way I talk to my daughter, the way I talk to my secretary, and the way I talk to my CEO are four completely different people." And if that's you, and if that's something you're catching in the back of your mind, that shows you right then and there that you're not consistent with your personality,
Yeah.
and you really need to look inside yourself and into yourself to understand who is really underneath all those masks.
I agree. So, personal story, and I'm going back to that question. Just sticking with me. What are you pushing for? Okay, which really, put another way, is what's important to you. Like really, in the big picture, what is important to you? I work with my clients. I want them to get clear on their why. Why are they doing what they're doing? What is really important to you? Like deep down, what's really important? What are you pushing for? Rewind back to 2011 when I started my journey. I had my other business, my sign and graphics business. I had had it at that point for 17 years, and
Oh,
I had decided I wanted to. I had a Oprah moment, the aha moment. Okay, and
I love that for you.
I decided to become a leadership coach, trainer, speaker, all that kind of stuff. Didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I took a program. John Maxwell, who was my idol. He's like leadership god, and I started the journey. I had my other business. I had two young kids, a wife. My dog didn't have my dog at the time, and she hasn't barked yet. And I was just studying, and I fell in love with it. That was my passion. As well, even though I had
Oh,
my other business, that was my passion, and I was nonstop studying. And my family knew I wasn't even watching Canuck hockey games, which I wish it was now because I don't want to watch them now because they're the worst in the league. I digress. But there's a point to this. I was so drinking the Kool-Aid. I was so in love with leadership. And it was my purpose. It was my passion. It was my future. It's what I was going to do. I was going to help business owners, my own team. A couple months in, I remember we were out for dinner, and my wife said to me, "You're doing this leadership stuff for everyone else. Don't forget about your family." I was in denial at the time, but I saw it shortly after because
wow.
I was so, and it's easy, it's easy to know, okay, when you're pushing for money, okay, it might be the wrong thing, but you're just pushing, you're pushing, pushing. It's all the same. But when you're in love with what you do, okay, it's so hard to see that you're missing everything around you. And I
Yeah, it can get carried away.
And I started coaching entrepreneurs. I started coaching my own team, my staff, my team, my leadership team, and I loved it. But I wasn't being the leader for my family during that time
Mhm.
that I needed to be. I wasn't horrible, but I wasn't being the leader that I needed to be. And I thought I didn't believe it at the time because I was so, um, I was living my passion or my purpose. My ultimate passion really is my family. But I forgot that for a while. And I didn't know that I forgot that. And that's why I think and I share that, right? Because I think a lot of business owners go through that. They love what they do, or maybe they don't, but in this case, they love what they do. Um, Work doesn't feel like work. It's play. They just love it. Like I could do this all day long, okay? But if I did do this all day long, I would burn out.
Very true.
So, what are some tips that you can give our listeners when they're so caught up in what they do and they're pushing, even if they're pushing for something for themselves and for their family, but they're pushing so hard before the burnout comes, because it will? What can they do to slow down in order to speed up?
Well, there's two solutions. One is very small, but very hard to do. The other one is bigger, but easier to do. So the first thing I always recommend is to stay present. And what that means is that when you at work, you really concentrate on your work. And when you at home, you concentrate on your family. A lot of people sometimes say, oh, when I'm at home, I think about my work. And when I'm at work, I'm thinking about my family. Well, that's counterproductive because really then you're splitting yourself up where you're better off just investing those hours and then allocating specific hours for the family or maybe a day. For example, I remember for us, it started with Sunday. I announced to my kids and my family that Sunday is our holy day. We're going to spend time together, whether it's holding hands in the living room or traveling and, I don't know, driving around, discovering places. It was the family day no matter what. And I think that was a great beginning because after that, it was so enjoyable that it turned into weekends. And then the rule came to the afternoons after 6. And now I find that there is more balance, even for my husband, between work and home. Because for him, he's still running the businesses. I do more spiritual work, so I can have the luxury of working from home. He actually physically goes to the office, goes to our warehouses, and he has multiple warehouses that he's got to support. So sometimes, just like you said, he gets carried away and he puts purpose before his passion. And I believe to any human being, family is passion if we're talking from our soul.
Mhm.
And I remember having conversation with my husband last year where we're talking about goals. And I said, okay, well, what are your goals at the end of the life? Like, where do you want to see yourself? And he goes, well, I want to be close to my kids. I want to be close to you. I want us to have this feeling of togetherness. I want my kids coming to me all the time. I want us to have traditions. And he named all the right things. And Marshall, I was waiting to see what he's going to say on how he's going to get there. And I thought he's going to say, we'll do more family dinners. Let's create more traditions. But no, his answer was, to get to that togetherness, he was going to work harder.
Mm.
I remember looking at him and I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I just need to put more hours at work and work harder so I can make more money. So when we retire, we have the time. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, by the time you make that money and you retire, your kids will be so far separated from you that they're not going to even want to come see you because you substitute work for family. And really, I'm not saying it's going to be 50-50. Balance, it's not about equality. Balance is about if you chose today to work, please allocate at least an hour for your family or for yourself. And for that, I have a bigger tool. Yeah.
I have to stop you for a second. I want everyone to hear this. I'm writing this down. Man, Julia, you're just like delivering today. You're knocking it out of the ballpark. Balance is not equality. Oh my gosh, I love that because so many people strive for work-life balance. But the way, just when I heard that, just by saying it, I agree 100%. It's not balance does not equal equality. It's not equal to equality. Balance is not equality because some days you're going to be grinding a bit more. Some days you're going to be with family a bit more. But we need to, even if you just said, and continue on, cut you off, but even if it's an
Yeah,
hour a day, yeah,
it's just
continue. Sorry,
about being
balance is not
present.
equality. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole point is if you're at home, be invested at home. Because a lot of people, even when they're at home, they're still on their phone and they're working. And really, even with rest, if you think about it, work versus rest cannot be equal.
Mhm.
Because as much as people think they can rest forever, believe me, it's not true. I forget the person's name, but he's quite famous. He's a millionaire. And I remember watching one of his podcasts and interviews, and he was kind of explaining that at the age of 32, he had enough money where he thought he's going to retire. So for about a year and a half, he'd done nothing but pleasure. He would wake up in the morning and be like, you know what, today I'll take my private jet to Hong Kong. I want to check it out. Or today I want to just stay home, or I want to fly there, or I want to experience this. And one thing he learned, he said that during that year and a half, he did not gain any knowledge. He just spent,
Mhm.
I believe it was like $2.5 million. But really, there was no residual after that. He didn't feel satisfied. He didn't feel accomplished. He didn't feel like he really reached some kind of a goal. He said he felt like he just wasted time. So rest is very important, but again, in moderations. Because if we resting 3 months in a row, come on, Marshall, that's not rest anymore. That's simply laziness, right? Or lack of
Yeah.
motivation. And it might be clinical depression that's causing it. There might be reasons. I'm not debating that. But I'm
Mhm.
saying that having a vacation 7 to 10 days after working for a few months should recharge your battery. And
Mhm.
yes, there's little things that you can do on daily basis. And this is where my second tool comes in. I call it a cheat sheet. And what it is, I always ask my clients to take a piece of paper, separate it on 3 to 4 columns, depending on what situation they're in. And the 3 columns that are consistent for everybody would be things I do for my mind, things I do for my body, things I do for my soul. And then the fourth
Mhm.
one, person can put things I do for my child or for my family or for my spouse, whatever else they want to add. But the first three is what really recharges our battery. Because one thing we got to remember is that when we're working, even if we're working with purpose and passion, we're still giving out energy. We're still depleting our reserve, kind of like a cell phone, right? Like
Mhm.
cell phone drains its energy. It's normal, it's common. But if you don't recharge a cell phone, it's going to stop working. So the same thing for humans. It's normal for us to work and give away our energy, but it's very important to replenish. Yes, sleep helps us replenish it. Yes, vacations help us replenish it, but there has to be something in between, the little things that keeps us going. So for example, when we look at the body, normally I ask a person to write something down between maybe 20 to 30 lines of things that they can do within 15 minutes. For
Mhm.
example, a 15-minute walk, 5 minutes of sit-ups, maybe a quick shower or a contrast shower. You know, you heat up for 2 minutes, you throw 5 seconds of cold. It does rejuvenate you. It does give you that energy boost. It does make your body feel like you're aware of it and you're present. Another thing you can do is simple as taking vitamins, or maybe taking a booster shot, or maybe go, I don't know, dancing in your living room. So just movement, something that you can do for your body, yoga, stretches, allocate it, write it out. So in the moments when you feel tired emotionally or drained mentally, you can do something to give your body a bit of a boost to help your mental state. Because you know, when they say that if you work out mentally, it gives you dopamine and you feel happier, and all of a sudden you're more productive. So it's the same concept. When we move our body, when we do something for our body, it does recharge our battery. Even a walk, as much as it's a physical activity, it's an active rest. It kind of starts that energy movement that helps us keep going. Now, going back to the second column of mind, there's things that we can do like reading, learning a new skill, maybe a language. Somebody can take a rule of learning one new word a day to expand their vocabulary. Personally, for me, in the last few months, I was taking violin classes. I realized that it's something that I wanted to do and something I play with, and I find that it's very soothing, right? So to somebody, it can be an instrument, you name it, you go for it. And even learning something new, right? Or listening to a podcast, it still goes into a mental column. And then we have soulful column. So for the soulful column, you can do good deeds, and those are just
Mhm.
endless. From buying somebody a coffee behind you in Tim Hortons lineup to opening a door or paying somebody a compliment or just lighting somebody's day. Like one of my favorite things to do is when I'm out and about, I keep awareness for sad or grumpy people. And when I see somebody in an off
Mhm.
mood, I'll kind of evaluate what I like about them. And then I'll approach them and be like, sorry to bug you. I just wanted to say, you have a really cool hat. Or, sorry to bother you, but I have to say, like, you have such a beautiful eyes, like depending on who the person is. And I find that that bit of positivity really lights up somebody's day that reflects onto you and your soul. Marshall, did you had a question?
Well, I was just going to stop you there because we have some listeners that are in Vancouver. You're obviously not from Vancouver, because if you were from Vancouver, if you did that in Vancouver, have you ever been to Vancouver?
Yes, couple times. I love it, but not enough to know what you're about to say.
If you do that in Vancouver in an elevator at I don't even know if we have any stores anymore with elevators, but if you do it on someone on the street, they're going to think you're like completely crazy. People, right? I'm from the prairies. That comes across well.
in Vancouver, people are like, oh my, like lock her up because people don't talk to people. Not a good
That's
thing,
funny.
but you don't talk to strangers in Vancouver. It's like people are very, so sorry. It just, when you said that, I'm thinking, not in Vancouver, but that is very nice. That is,
Well, you know what? There is lots of different things we can do as good deeds. And I remember actually, I had a client who was struggling with self-esteem. And he just went through divorce, and his wife had this notion of referring to him as worthless. And I remember he said, it's really hard to build yourself up when somebody close to you calling you that name. And I said, okay, now here's the thing. Um, and this reminded me sort of my daughter. Years back, she comes home from school and she's crying. And she goes, Mom, Emily said I was stupid, but I'm not. And she's crying about it, right? And I look at her and I say, okay, I have a question for you. And mind you, my daughter was super skinny. I said, what if Emily said that you were very fat? My daughter starts laughing. She's like, look at me. Of course I'm not fat. And I'm like, what would just happen? If Emily calls you stupid, you cry because you're not. But if Emily calls you fat, you know you're not, you're laughing at it. So one thing that when somebody's struggling with self-esteem, I always say, do good deeds. Because if you're a good doer, nobody can say you're worthless. And
mhm.
one of the things I recommend, I said, Sunday morning, go to soup kitchen, feed homeless. And now nobody can ever refer to you as worthless because you already contributed to society without getting anything back. Because when we think of work, we get paid. So we can't call it a good deed. But when we're doing something from the bottom of our heart, that also can lift our energies. Now, another thing that would go good in a soulful column is maybe cooking a meal that you would eat in a childhood. You know, maybe listening to a song, maybe, I don't know, meditating and doing a dance or watching clouds if, weather permit. So there's
Mhm.
really a lot of things we can do for our mind, body, and soul. And there's a lot of things that are actually under a 15-minute time span. So really, if you think about it, within 45 minutes, and you can take those intervals anytime through the day, you can fulfill your needs slowly but surely. And if you just take those little time slots for yourself, that's already awareness enough that you exist and that you're present.
And I'm going to push back on people who say, I don't have the time because everyone has 15 minutes here. You can find 15 minutes there.
Oh,
Julia,
100%.
yeah,
Actually, Marshall, I
so,
have a funny story for you. I remember when I first came up with this tool, first, I always try everything on myself, then my husband, my kids, and then I bring it to society. So I remember I told my husband to come up with this list, and one of the things that he wrote for his body was vitamins. Now, mind you, between my husband constantly flying between, Texas and Canada, Toronto, you name it, he's there. So he does have a very busy schedule. Now, with that being said, when he picked to take a vitamins that day, I thought he for sure gonna nail it. Marshall, he came home that night and I go, did you follow through on your vitamins? And he goes, Julia, they're still in my bag. Case closed. Like when you think about it, sometimes people can't even take 5 seconds to swallow a vitamin that might
mhm.
help them, their cognitive thinking. It might help, I don't know, their blood pressure issues. It might be magnesium that calms them down. Like there's so many things that can help us that really takes less than 5 seconds to do or use. And even then, people can't put themselves first.
Until, okay, before we go, I agree with you 100%. Until something happens and you collapse
True.
or you have like heart issues and the doctor says you have to take this medicine. Then you could be, and the reason is because you understand the deeper why. There's a reason, there's a why, there's a purpose that's going to save your life. Whereas the vitamin is something to maintain and prevent, right? But if you
Well,
really
that's
think
one
of,
thing.
but if you think about it, if you really think about it, if the doctor said you have to take this vitamin every single day, which a doctor, regular doctor, medicine doctor wouldn't, but if they say you have to take this vitamin every single day, he probably really would.
Oh,
Can't,
100%. And I find that there is a saying that it takes people to hit the rock bottom to
yeah,
change.
yeah,
And this is why I urge my clients, people that are listening, your clients, take those 5 to 15 minutes.
yeah.
Do those things, recharge your battery, and then you'll never have to reach that bottom to bounce back.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. It's awesome. Everything you've shared. Okay, so how can people get in touch with you? We're going to put it in the show notes, but just what's the easiest way for people to get in touch with
I
you?
think the best way is LinkedIn
Okay,
or Instagram. I do have a
okay,
website. Anybody
okay.
who would Google my name, the information comes up, very available. And I'm always happy for people to reach out.
Okay, Julia, this has been phenomenal. And um, before we go, gang, listeners, viewers, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What's the next step for you? And are you going to ask yourself, well, that question, what are you pushing for? Julia's shared so many golden nuggets here that are not just golden nuggets, but they can completely, if you implement. Here's the thing about the stern truth. Here's the thing about Julia, what I say, what I share all the time. You can have all these amazing people listening to and getting all these amazing gold nuggets. If we don't take action and we don't implement consistently, nothing's going to change. And I always say nothing changes if nothing changes. Julia, thank you. You are
Thank you
amazing.
so much, Marshall, for having me.
Might have to have you back one of these days because I know there's so much more you can share. But gang, reach out to Julia if you want to have a conversation, if you want to connect with her. I'll put all the stuff in the show notes. And yeah, this has been awesome. So we'll see everyone again next week on another episode of The Stern Truth, Business Unfiltered. Bye for now, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Stern Truth. If you found today's episode helpful, we would love to hear from you. Please like, share, and leave us a review. Also, if you'd like to be a guest in an upcoming episode or join us in one of our Momentum Accountability Group sessions, simply email me to marshall@marshallstern.net. That's marshallstern.net. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep pushing forward and leading with confidence.